Rug hooking 101 is my way of giving you sort of the down and dirty. Here's what you need for rug hooking. Ignore the rest, at least for now. Okay? There is so much confusion for new rug hookers because there's so much information out there. And there's a lot of contradictory information. Somebody may say something different than what I say. My message to you on that is to find out why they're saying that. If there's a difference, find out the whys and then make your decision based on the whys and listen to that information. Because in my opinion, I think there's some information out there that's just downright wrong and it's not helpful. But we all have our own opinions, and so it's fine. It's important that you learn how to learn. And the way to learn is to ask why. Here's one. Stir the dye in the 1 cup of hot water for 1 minute. Why? So the dye is smooth and even. Well, what if you have no intentions of dyeing your wool smooth and even? Then don't stir it for a minute, right? So once you know the reason why, then you can ignore a rule or you can adhere to a rule, and you choose what rules you live by. So what equipment do you need to get started? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. You need a hook. It can be a crochet hook shoved in a handle. They make some crochet hooks now that have nice big fat handles. I wonder if I have one of those in here. There's a company called Hobby Lobby that a lot of you might know. They sell a hook. This is not their hook, but they sell a hook that has this spongy stuff on it. Okay. This spongy stuff, I am just going to make a little bit of an adjustment there for people on Zoom. This spongy stuff is what we took off of the hook from Hobby Lobby. But the Hobby Lobby hook is not thick at the shank, okay? My best recommendation for a hook is to have a thick shank, meaning the diameter down here needs to be bigger than the diameter at the business end. Does that mean you have to stop using the hook that you're using? No, but this could make your life easier, okay? This just happens to be an old Nancy Miller hook. It's precious to me because it was given to me by Nancy Miller. And I told her, it's great, but I don't think I can use it because the handle's not thick enough. And she disappeared and came back and put this little foam stuff on it. And that's what's making it better for me. I like a hook that's going to hit me right there in the hand. And if I can get that kind of a situation, that's where I need to do. You need a small pair of scissors. These are offset scissors, okay, because they're bent. And notice how they're bent. They're bent this way, not the other way, okay, so that when you cut, you are cutting nice and flat, and you still have room for your fingers, okay. I know some beginners who will buy scissors that are bent, but they don't realize they're bent the wrong way. They're bent like this way instead of this way. So pay attention to that. Do you need these right away? No. All you need is a small pair of, I used to say 99-cent scissors, but is anything 99 cents anymore? I don't have a pair sitting around, but just the small scissors that they sell at school time for kids. That'll work just fine. The other thing that you need, let me shift cameras. Oh, and my windows here all disappeared. So let me do this. Okay, so you need a backing, okay? I prefer rugwort. It's my favorite. That's what you're looking at here. I think it's the easiest for beginners to learn from. Do not learn on monk's cloth, okay? Monk's cloth may work from the standpoint that it's cheap, but it is the hardest backing to hook into. The way you know it is that it has occasional white threads in it. Okay, this has none of that. This is very heavy. It's very thick. This is rugwarp. Rugwarp is like denim, and monk's cloth is like quilting cotton, very thin. This is much, much heavier. So we talked about scissors. We talked about the hook. We talked about the backing. The other thing you'll need is a frame. This is, and I don't have it in the frame very well, but this is a Puritan frame. It's my favorite frame. It is no longer made anymore, but you can find plenty of them used, because when I started back in 2000, every single person that I knew who hooked was using a Puritan frame. Okay, so there's tons of them out there, and you can get them used at all different price points. If you get it under $100, buy it and run. If they're offering the Puritan stand to go with it, take the frame, leave the stand. The stand is not good, so do not get the Puritan stand. It tends to bounce a lot. I sell a collapsible stand that'll fit inside the Puritan, so if you get a bag that fits your Puritan, it'll fit the stand. But right now they're out of stock, but my son is coming this spring, and I'm really hoping that I can encourage him to make at least the hardest parts for me so that I can finish them and do the rest of them. So let's talk about pulling some loops. And I had practiced on this piece in this location. Let me switch over to here. And right now what you see is my hand underneath. Okay. And then you're seeing my other hand, which is here on top. And I'm going to take that out because that's just in the way. And the easiest way to describe this is that you just poke the fabric and you get that on to that hook any way that you can. I did it by sort of separating it and then hooking it and bringing it through. How you get the tail up is messy sometimes. Just get that tail up. Once you have the tail up, then you're going to go down and you're going to pull up a loop. And what I do is I go down, I hold the wool in the direction I'm hooking. In this particular case, I'm hooking from here and going up. I prefer hooking from the bottom going up. The majority of people prefer working from the top down. I like bottom up because then all I have to do is hold this piece of cloth ahead of me and away I can go. Now, let me break that down into smaller steps. When you go in and you are getting ready to grab it, my hand does not move. Okay? So I am not doing, if you're a knitter, I'm not doing a yarn over. Okay? What I'm doing is I'm holding it out there, making it available, and then I'm going in and scooping it up. Okay? So think of it this way. When you put your hook in, and you pull it up, think of this hook as a big spoon, kitchen spoon. And you're going into a pot of vegetable soup and you're scooping it up, and you're going to want to bring that up in a way that doesn't dump the soup off the spoon, right? So if I turn my hand this way, I'm doing a couple things. I'm doing a lot more movement than I need to. Plus, I'm causing some irritation and causing some possible carpal tunnel problems, right? So what you want to do is go in, scoop, pull it up. And if you notice, I'm pulling the loops toward the work that's already done. If I pulled it the other way, it pulls that last loop out. So if you're in the situation where every time you pull a loop up, you pull the next, when you pull up the next one, it pulls the first loop out. What you need to do is just to roll the work towards the work that you've already got done. And that covers you for any direction that you want to go. Okay? So that is the simplistic part of pulling loops. Now, what I want to ask you is, what questions do you have about that? Oops. Let me find you. Main camera. There we go. What questions do you have? If you're on YouTube, you can enter them into the comments. I will see them in the comments. And if you're on Zoom, you have the added advantage where you can simply unmute and then ask me a question.
I have a question.
Sure. What's your question?
Sometimes my wool underneath doesn't seem to be in the right position, and it's hard to scoop.
Okay. So let's go back and let's take a look at that. Let me get the right.
And the picture of me is in the way of your hand underneath. I'm trying to get rid of my picture on the screen.
Are you on a phone?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard on a phone. Yeah, definitely the best experience on Zoom is on a computer. Okay. So
yeah, I'll have to figure out how to install that later.
Yeah. So basically, so let's do this. Let me get this nice and big. Okay. So on here, your question is, once you've got it up, let me hook in all directions. Let me just pick a spot here and just make an imaginary circle. So what you're going to do is, I'm going to hook this way, going around. Okay. So what I'm doing is I am lining up the strip going this way. And then I'm going this way. And then I'm going this way. Now, when it gets to the point where it's like, okay, this is too far on this hand. So what I need to do is come at it from the other direction. I change my fingers a little bit, but I'm still pulling the strip so that it's in front of me. And I do this weird little thing where I only do it when I'm hooking down or from the right to the left, because those are not my favorite positions. So I pull it up and then I have to like come back down and redo it. But once I get to like a point like this, now I'm back into, not quite, there we go. Now I'm back into my favorite position and I can simply pull it up. Now what I do with most circles, because I love to put circles in my designs, is I never end it there. I always go inside that circle and hook at least 3 loops, sometimes a whole lot more, because I think a circle that is crooked looks better in rug cooking than an absolutely perfect circle. So if you're like, I can't hook a circle, and this one's not a circle, it's a little squished from top to bottom, but I'm okay with that. That's close enough. Anybody looking at that is going to recognize that as a circle. So I'm not real worried about that from that point of view. So I guess the way to look at that, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's go back to that. Let me get to the other. There we go. The way to hook the wool is to always have the wool traveling ahead of where you're going. So as I'm hooking, if I'm hooking from the bottom up, I'm going to hold the wool up here. As I'm going down, I'm going to hold the wool this way and hook it. And I think that's why, based on what I do with my hand underneath, I like hooking from the bottom up, because I can do that really quickly. And that just works with my brain. But if it works better for you to go in the other direction, then by all means do that. Did that help? Was it Gail who asked that question?
Yes, that helped a lot.
Okay. Were you practicing it? I saw that you had to like move to answer that.
Oh no, I'm just moving around a lot.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
But that makes a lot more. I can work with that and see what happens.
Right. And if you don't show up at the hook-ins, we have them every Wednesday and Saturday. Kim does the Wednesday one. I do the Saturday one. There will be one today after. In fact, we're borrowing the link for the Saturday hook-in. So I'll just stay here until 4 o'clock, and you're welcome to stay here with me. And we'll go into the 4 o'clock hook-in, and you can meet some of the regulars who come to that. But we got time and time for more questions. Surely there are more questions than just that. Who else has a question? Yeah.
Cindy, you may, in equipment for hooking, you may want to talk a little bit about cutters.
Yeah.
I realize
yeah.
for our new gals, to know.
For the new gals, you can buy any cutter you want. It's your money, you can buy it. But I can tell you what other students have done. They'll go off and they'll buy another cutter, and they always come back and they want what was originally called the Townsend cutter and is now called the Beeline. There's a similar one that is made by, it just went out of my head.
Larry Alt.
Larry in Sydney, Ohio. And his cutters are just as good. In fact, the stuff's interchangeable. His blades will work in the Beeline, and the Beeline will work in there. There has been a little bit of a problem recently, to the tune of like 0.5 thousandths of an inch kind of a thing. And my husband has done some fixing on some of the cutter blades, because he's a millwright and he deals with thousandths of an inch. And so, if you have somebody who works with machinery, they can help you in case the blades are not perfect. Sometimes sending them back is a longer process than you would like it to be. And right now, some of the blade sizes are hard to get. I heard rumors that they might stop making a number 3. I can't imagine that. There is a whole fine cut shaded culture built around number 3s, but the technology is a little bit harder. I have a Townsend number 2 because Townsend made a number 2 and it works beautifully. Do I use it much? No, but I use it like when I'm hooking a landscape and I want to put in some accents. It's those little after things that I put in there. And a 2 is really hard to cut with scissors. You got to have a really steady hand and good eyesight. My hands are okay. My eyesight's not so good. So I can't cut a number 2. When you buy your cutter, you can definitely cut with scissors. And what you want are short bladed scissors. This is one set. These are actually a little bit on the big side. I have some smaller ones that are even smaller, but I like them where they have nice big places for my fingers, even if this blade is smaller. And you pay a premium for them, so they might be $11, $12, $15, something like that. This one is, I never remember it, Karen Buckley, I think. Karen K. Buckley The other ones are Tim Holtz, are the two brands that I really prefer. If not, you get the little tiny scissors that they sell at school during, the school supplies season. That's going to be your best bet. And then when you're ready for the cutter, I recommend 2 blades. And what you need to do is to try a bunch of different cut sizes. If you don't have a way of cutting different sizes, then, ask somebody else who maybe has the different blades, give them the wool and say, can you please cut these in different sizes for me? And then practice with them, see which ones you like. There's going to be a couple that are going to be like, nope, don't like that. That hurts my shoulder pulling those up. And that's going to be the bigger ones, 6, 7, 8, 9s, that kind of thing. There's going to be the smaller ones that might feel too tedious, and that might not fit with your personality. Zoom in on where you want to be. What's going to be your favorite cut size? Doesn't mean you have to use it forever, but that's your starting place. Okay. For me, it was a number 7. I love a number 7. It's nice and big. It's not too small. It seems to fit in most places. So if I were a brand new beginner and I were to buy my cutter, I would buy it with a 7 and a number 5, because I recommend skipping skipping one size, or is that 2 sizes? I don't know. But you're going to skip the 6 and then you're going to go to a 5, right? Because I can cut, if I'm clever, I can cut that 7 or that number 7 cut size in half and end up with something that doesn't exist, a 3.5, right? I can cut those 7s in half. They're big enough that I can do it. I do have sort of a tip. This is not a tip that I came up with, but this was a tip that someone told me, and I think it's genius. So you take your cut, and these are all smaller sizes. This one's a touch bigger. But what you do is you go into your backing and you bring out your strip. And now I'm just going to use my regular rug hooking scissors, but I would just use a small bladed scissors. And then this becomes your third hand. And so now you can hold it. And I'm going to do this without getting my head in the camera because I really want to do this, which isn't going to do anything for you guys, right? And you can cut it. And then when you need more, you just pull it out. And it's a nice, quiet way to cut your loops. So if you're thinking about maybe a number, let's say a number 8 cutter blade for your cutter, you're going to want to go down 2 sizes, say to a 6. So if you have an 8 and a 6, you can still get, say, a 4 or even a 3 by cutting those in half. And so you could hook everything you want to hook with 2 cutter blades. Now, is that what I do? No, I bought all the blades when they first came out. And that's going to be the best time to buy them. So there's this old saying that when's the best time to plant a tree? You plant a tree today or 20 years ago. That would be your best time, right? When's the best time to buy your cutter? Today or 20 years ago. Now, 20 years ago, the Townsend cutter didn't exist. But thankfully, it came out. What it did for me was it replaced 3 full-blown cutters. I had the Rigby, I think it's called the Double D, meaning it would hold two different cutter blades at the same time. And then you had fingers that had to go in between the blades. It was utter nonsense. The Townsend cutter is so much easier. Well, I keep calling it the Townsend. That's what I know it as because mine is a Townsend. The new ones, oh, Diana, help me out.
Beeline
Beeline.
or Larry.
Thank you. I get honey beehive and beeline and my tongue won't work. And it just doesn't work. But you can get those. Now, the beeline cutter people do not sell the cutters directly. They're sold through a distributor. And there's a bunch of people who are distributors. Probably the best well-known one is going to be Door Mill Store. And you want to call Terry Door at Door Mill Store, tell them Cindy Gay sent you, and order your beeline cutter through it that way. They used to come to Sauter Village back when they were Townsend. And then I think they did like maybe one more time as beeline, and now they don't come as a vendor. So we used to be able to get our cutters delivered to us at Sauter. They don't do that anymore. So you have to go through the mail and just bite the bullet and do it, because I can tell you the price tomorrow is going to be more expensive than it is now. Okay. So Kat's Gallery is putting me right where I need to be. So she is asking, how do I add another wool strip? Does it have to finish at the top? Do I start the new strip in the same hole that I ended? Yes and no, all at the same time. Okay, so generally what will happen is if I'm going to continue in the same direction, then I will pull, and I didn't bring a contrasting color, although this turquoise is kind of different. I can pull up the next strip in the same hole, as long as I'm continuing in the same direction. If for some reason I don't want to continue in the same direction, that's good too. And what I'll do, particularly when I'm hooking a circle or I'm hooking next to a circle, is I'll come up nice and close to that and put that tail nice and flat up against it, and then start hooking out from there. And then I can go anywhere I want. You know, maybe I want to go over this way, you know, or something like that. There is no rule that says thou shalt have every tail in the same hole. Does that make sense? You can put your tails wherever. But if I'm hooking like a straight line, like around a border, then I will definitely, where one comes up, I'll start the next one. Because if you think about it, it distributes the pressure a little bit more evenly. Because when a loop comes up and goes down, there's two pieces of wool in that one hole, right? So when I have a tail, I put two tails in that hole, and it continues with the same kind of pressure. So it makes that backing a little bit happy. So Carolyn, I need another, I don't know what RA is. Rheumatoid arthritis? Is that what you mean? I'll come back to that if I see an answer from you. April is saying, I'm just learning and have no supplies. I don't know where to start. I would say refer to the beginning of this video.
So Carolyn, I need another, I don't know what RA is. Rheumatoid arthritis? Is that what you mean?
No.
Okay,
I'll come back to that if I see
somebody's
an answer
got,
from you.
let me mute everybody again.
April is saying, I'm just,
Hold on. I can't seem to mute everybody. Why is it not allowing me to do mute all? Okay, well, whoever had their thing unmuted is now muted. But if you have a question, if you're on Zoom, and as long as nothing's playing in the background, you can unmute and ask me a question. But April, yeah, refer to the beginning. You need very little supplies. What I find new rug cookers doing is going out and buying supplies that they don't need and then not building their stash, which they do need. Okay. Okay. Just had some stuff going on in the. What other questions?
Sorry, I don't have a question, but if I leave, it's because my battery went dead. So just to let you know.
That's fine. That's fine. You can disappear on a Zoom call. That is fine. You are invited to do that at any time. You don't have to stay. Anybody else? Is there anybody else who has a question? I'm taking questions from YouTube. Hopefully, I haven't seen it refresh in a while. Okay, so I didn't get Carolyn's last yes. So Carolyn is saying rheumatoid arthritis. Well, all I can say is that the direction of hooking has to do more with how your fingers move and what you're comfortable with than it does with rheumatoid arthritis. What does affect rheumatoid arthritis, and I had a friend whose hands were severely crippled, and she could still rug hook, but she built her hook up until it was like this big, and it was almost like and she held it almost like her hand was a claw, and that worked for her. She made many, many rugs in her later years doing that. And I think in the beginning, I think it was just duct tape that she wrapped around. Do yourself a favor, make it comfortable, make it pretty, but make it cheap, okay? You can get some of that clay, they call it polymer clay, that you can build up on your handle and then bake it in an oven, and it'll harden, and you can make that your favorite color. You could put dots on it. You can do anything you want. You can get as creative as you want with it. But get a hook that fits your hand. The hooks that I do not recommend. This will be something that'll be different than other people. And I think it's mainly because I don't sell hooks. Okay. I don't recommend pencil hooks. And I don't recommend you hold your hook like this. Okay. There's a flat spot on this hook and it's for your thumb. You put your thumb on it and you wrap your hand around it and then you hook. There's no little tiny muscles. When I'm doing it this way, there's little tiny muscles that are working, and I'm never going to make it in a 4-day workshop. I'm never going to make it pulling wide cut strips using just my fingers. So you put your thumb on the flat spot. If you don't have a flat spot on your hook, you can add one, okay? Let me get the camera to focus. See how that is? The business end is pointing up, and there's a flat spot right there. If you don't have a woodworker who can cut that for you, then simply sit in front of the TV with a small piece of sandpaper and just hold it and rub your thumb. Over time, you will have the same cutout that I have on mine, and it makes it handy. What I use this cutout for is to get my hook in the right position. I have very, very impaired up close vision. Okay, yeah, it seems contradictory, but you can do that with rug cooking. You can get away with poor vision. There are people in Helen Richie's charity who hook completely blind. And yes, they're aided by a sighted person or a partially sighted person, but as long as they know that the red strips are on this shoulder, the blue strips are there, in their mind's eye, they can hook whatever it is they're doing. But what I use this flat spot for is to get my hook in the right position. If it's not in the right position, it's not going to grab the loops. And for me, the right position is with that hook pointing straight up. It lines up perfectly with my thumb and points straight up. What I used to do before I had a flat area is I would pinch the end of it, and I would just feel the end of my hook and put it in my hand so that that was pointing up before I get going. Okay. So I'm reading some comments that are here on Zoom. Mary is saying that the Big Shot and the Odd Duck are popular for beginners. Those are the ones that are used for scrapbooking. And I know about those. I personally don't prefer them because it can screw up a bunch of wool really quick, and I'm not down for that. But a lot of people like them. So, I mean, that's something to look at. But she says the most important money is on your hook. Yeah. And it is so important that I even have, I don't know if you can see it on the camera. You can't see my face if I do it. There we go. I even have my name engraved on them. And that's because at Sauter Village, in the small town that's nearby, Archbold, they do this engraving for us, and we just drop them off and then they do the engraving. I do that so that I don't actually accidentally sell my own hook to a beginner. Because if someone's here and they're desperate and they want a hook, I start digging through and looking for what I could sell them, and yeah, it's not pretty. I've sold some of my favorites before. But what's important is that diameter. You want that diameter. Mine is probably a 6 millimeter diameter. It's not the really thick one, which would be like an 8 millimeter. And I will use this hook to hook everything from a number 3 to a 9. This one hook will do it all. You don't need a special hook for each of the sizes. Okay. What do you do if you don't have a wide shank hook? Okay, so let's look at that for a minute. Okay, here we go. So what do you do if you don't have a wide shanked hook? Let's make this a little bit easier for people in Zoom. You're going to put your hook into the backing and then sort of rotor it. Okay? Oh, you can't see the bottom of that. Let me do that over here so you can see it. So you're going to go in and you're going to move it around like that. See how big it made that space? Okay. Then when you're pulling the loop up, you're going to push down. You're going to push down on the back and you're going to rub sort of like this. You're going to be rubbing the back. You're going to be rubbing the back of this hook on the backing. So you're going to go down, push it all the way to the bottom, which does the work for you. You don't have to rotor it, right? If it's thick, just push it all the way down to the bottom and then scoop it up, but push down. And what that does, it allows this bent part of the hook to come clear of all the other threads because you're pushing down and making that space for it to come up. And it's one of those things that it's going to take time. So I taught you the actual stitch or the rug hooking method, and you just repeat that a million times and boom, you're an experienced rug hooker. So it's all about moving forward. As a beginner, I don't recommend that you rip out. Just keep going. You can always circle back to what you hooked in the beginning, rip it out, and rehook it. That's what's nice. It's not like knitting that you gotta go all the way back and then redo it. No, You can go back to the beginning and rip it out and pop in some new stuff. But if you're constantly putting in loops, ripping them out, putting it in, ripping it out, you're doing yourself a disservice because you won't be able to see where you've been and where you're going. Leave it in until you're all the way done and everything's hooked around it, and then it looks odd. Rip that part out and hook it again. By then, you're going to know exactly what to do, and it's going to be easy. What fabric do you start with? So I don't know if you mean the backing or the wool, so let's talk about both. This is rugwort, which is my favorite backing. It is bang for the buck, going to be your best price point. It's not as cheap as burlap or monk's cloth, but I consider burlap and monk's cloth unusable. Unusable. Okay, my opinion. You might love monk's cloth, and you have your reasons. I have my reasons. It's too limpy. So when I put it on the floor as a rug, it doesn't stay stiff and flat. I want my rug to stay stiff and flat. I don't want wrinkles in the center of my rug. So I use rugwort for that reason, because it's stiff and it's heavy. There's also linen. And by the way, gals, buy your linen now. I just talked to Terry Dorr yesterday, and the prices are going way up. He's expecting about a 20% increase. Or it just had a 20% increase. I don't remember which. But check into that, because that price is just going up. The cotton seems to be a little bit more stable as far as price goes. But you always want to have, general rule of thumb, have on hand what you feel comfortable with for backing. Don't assume you can go out tomorrow and get it, because you might not be able to. For me, I want enough backing that I'm good for probably the rest of my life. Okay? I don't have 50 years of hooking left. I have something less than that. But I've got enough to last me the amount of time. I recommend you do at least a year's worth. Have that on hand. Within that year, if your favorite supplier is out of stock, it should come in by that time and you can go on. You don't want a situation where you've got a nice, healthy set of a wool collection like I do, and you have no backing whatsoever to hook into. Okay? So figure out what backing you like. I've got at least 2 videos on YouTube, more inside the rug hooking journey, that explain the differences, why I like one backing better than the other. As far as this stuff, what we pull up as loops, I prefer 100% wool. And I'm pretty picky about that. It has to be 100% wool. I don't like the weird, lumpy, bumpy, loosey-goosey stuff, which might be good as a special effect, but I would not buy it as something that I would then keep on my shelf as stock to be hooked with at any given time. I would try to buy your favorite kind of wool, which for me is a tightly woven, supple wool fabric that has been washed and felted up a little bit. That's what I prefer. So April, I hope that answers your question. She's on YouTube, so I can't really talk to her, but the rest of you are here on Zoom. What other questions do you have?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm using yarn, which I call wool, but now because I'm rug hooking, I have to call it yarn, not wool. But both of them together, like wool and yarn, when would you use each as far as effect goes?
I would use it for exactly the word that you used, for effect. Now, if you don't know what your wool looks like and you don't know what your yarn looks like, I have a method for that. Let me see if I can get one that's not totally goobered up by my dog. These get left laying around and he thinks they're chew toys. And they're not. So this is what I call a texture sampler. Okay? So it has a piece of the wool sewn onto it, and then the wool is hooked. This is useful if you're using textures. Now, textures in rug hooking terms do not have a texture you could feel. It's a visual texture. It's a print. It's a pattern. It's squares. It's checkers. It's going to be stripes. It's going to be something like that is called a texture in rug hooking language. Is it a best use of the term? No, but that's what it's turned into. So that's the communication we use. So these are all textures. And sometimes you get a piece of a texture, like this piece here. You might not know what that looks like hooked, right? But I hook up a sample of it, and then you can understand, and now you can start brainstorming what you can use it for. I would do the same thing with your yarns and hook a little bit of, your yarn in there. The thing with yarns, often they are used in combo, meaning you might use 2 strands at one time, right? To get them thicker, so it fills up the hole in the backing a little bit better. So doing your sample with yarn might not be as effective as it is with wool strips. Okay, does that make sense?
What do you mean not as effective?
Well, because it's probably, not always, but I would say probably going to be rare that you're going to hook an area solid with one yarn. You're usually going to mix in different yarns. You might even put 2 yarns together and pull them up at the same time. It just depends. Is your piece going to be a piece that is hooked with a mixture of yarn and wool strips, which is what's becoming very common? Is it going to be 100% yarn? It just depends on which way you're going with it. So, but you could definitely, like hook a square in wool strips, and then the way I would probably do it, if I had a yarn I was curious about, I might hook it as an outline around the wool strips, so I have at least a sampling of it. And then tie a piece of the yarn loose on it, so that's set for that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So Crystal is saying, Crystal, do you want to just unmute and ask your question?
Sorry, I'm at work, and so.
Oh, okay. Well, I can.
It's okay. Right now, I don't have a patient, so that's okay.
Go ahead and ask your question.
So I was at the Santa Fe rug cooking camp, and I saw a gal that had a cozy that just rested on top rather than having like the elastic that wraps around it. And I didn't know if you had seen a supplier for that, or if you'd ever seen one before.
Well, the best place to go is going to be to ask the person who made your frame. Do they have something? Okay? Because every frame is different. So if I had one that was perfect for the Puritan, it wouldn't fit. I may have trouble with names and stuff today. The one that Mary hooks on, Snapdragon, it won't fit a Snapdragon because the dimensions are off, right? So most people make them themselves. So if that's the case, let me ask you why you need one. And I'm going to venture a guess, Crystal, that you hook in linen.
Yes, I've just started doing some in rug warp, but
Okay.
and so yeah, it doesn't poke through as much as linen does. But yeah, linen,
Exactly.
yeah, you think that you're okay, and then it gets you.
Yeah, because for the most part, it's not going to get you if you're hooking in rug warp. The other thing that I would say is don't clean your gripper strips. I know some people who are like, at the end of the day, they clean their gripper strips. I don't think I've cleaned my gripper strips in 20 years. Leave them with threads in there, particularly if it's grabbing you and scratching you. If you've got a stray wire that somehow got bent and is always, getting you, then take a pair of pliers and just bend that sucker so it's harmless and get it out of the way. Rug warp, the grippers do not poke through rug warp, and it holds the rug warp tighter than it does linen, because the linen tends to just pop off sort of spontaneously. It just pops off the grippers. Rug warp doesn't do that. Once you put the rug warp down, it stays gripped. So that's one advantage. But I would just cut, if it was just flat, I think I know which ones you're talking about. Maybe you got a piece of wool that is like too thick to hook with, or a piece of wool that is, you cut it and it falls apart, but it's still wool. So you're hanging onto it and you don't know what to do with it. Lay it on your frame, cut a hole in it for
yeah,
where
that's
it goes,
true.
and then just stitch it. If you've got a sewing machine, stitch up the inside edges and the outside edges, or simple whip stitch, if you're doing it all by hand. That's what I would do. One of the things that I want to publish, I don't have it here with me. I have a pattern, and I meant to publish this probably 10 years ago, never did. But I have a pattern for the Puritan frame that goes on and has like a drawstring, kind of like it does on your sweatpants.
Oh, right.
So it doesn't have elastic per se, but it does have, a way to tighten it. And I've used that for years. And that's worked really good to cover, because left bare, they can, our skin's getting thinner every year. And those gripper strips can do some damage. And
they can get you. And then one more question is, do you take your rug off every night? Or, I mean, I've heard that that's more for like burlap, and I never have, but I did have an instructor that was like, get that off of there.
Yeah. I never have. If it's on my frame, it's on my frame. I don't hook as much at home as I do on the road. So that gets my rug off the frame quite a bit. I'll hook at guild meetings. I'll hook sometimes here on the hook-ins. But the last few years, I haven't had much time to just sit and hook. So I'll go away with girlfriends and we'll hook for a weekend. That kind of thing. So if you're using monk's cloth, I would say absolutely get that thing off the frame, because it's getting stretched out. Rug warp, it's so stable. I've never had an issue with it.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So April is asking, why not use a fabric cutter with a quilt measuring ruler? Because those tools were meant for cotton. But what happens is wool is much loftier, it's thicker, and so that wool, that ruler tends to move around. If you wanted an alternative way of cutting that is not a rug cooking cutter, I would snip, rip, and then cut it with small scissors. But if you do want to cut it with a fabric cutter, I would still snip it maybe every few inches and rip it. What's important is that, well, let me go back. Rewind. When you go to your cutter, you don't want to take anything wider than this. This is a 1/16 of a yard. This is from salvage to salvage. It's ripped parallel to the salvage, which is the quote unquote correct way to rip wool. And this fits in your hand. See how it's still laying flat? If I were to grab something bigger, like say this piece, and take this to my cutter, I'm going to booger this up. I am going to mess this up. And the mess up is really just a thread or two, okay? So what happens when it cuts? You want those threads that the fabric's woven, you want those threads to be from one end to the other end of the strip. You want them to be continuous. You don't want them kind of at a diagonal, right? Because if you pull on it, those will pull apart. And that's not a good experience when you're rug cooking, and it's not going to be good for the life of your rug. So you want those threads to be as parallel as possible. That's why when I take wool to my cutter, it's never any bigger than this. This is the smallest or the biggest I will bring to my cutter. If I only want a little bit cut off of this piece, I will find the end. I will snip it or just pinch it. Like my pinchers are pretty well developed now. And I would rip it apart and I would rip it so it's parallel. And then lay that on the ground and now cut that with your ruler. But that's going to be tough because that wool is going to be like this. So that's what the problem is. Cotton tends to stay very rigid, particularly if you've ironed it and it's new and unwashed. It's going to be very stiff. Wool, on the other hand, it's going to snake and it's going to do all kinds of things. And you're trying to go at it with a straight ruler and it's not going to work. That's why going over roughly an inch, snipping it, ripping it, and then cutting that into 4 pieces, that is always going to be your best bet.
You might want to talk a little bit about how to test to make sure something is 100% wool, plus washing. How to wash the wool.
That's a good one, Diana. So I always tell rug hookers that the best way to wash wool is the way you wash your blue jeans. Okay, no mercy. You are going to wash it with soap. You are going to put it through full cycle. You're going to put it in the dryer. That is exactly what I do with rug hooking wool. In fact, I washed some this morning and it's still in the washer. As soon as I'm done here, it's going to go into the dryer. And you dry it on a hot dryer with other things in it, you know. So I always wash my wool with blue jeans. I get a little bit of the family laundry done, but I also have something in there that's going to agitate the wool and felt it up. And when it's in the dryer, it's going to fluff it up. I know some rug hookers who only hang their wool and let it drip dry. Well, that's fine, but the wool tends to end up being kind of hard and not as soft to the touch. And I just don't like the feel of it. You know, it's like cooking with cardboard. So I would much rather put mine through the washer and dryer. Testing wool. I couldn't remember the second thing you told me, Diana. So testing wool. I remember, this was out by Larry Alt's. In fact, I think we had driven out there to see him and his wife at the time when she was still around. And we went to this big giant warehouse that my husband just loves called Glen, I think. I think it's called Glen's. And it's like, imagine this crazy man who hoarded everything that he could find, and you don't even know what some of these bits and pieces are, but he's got a 55-gallon drum of them, and they're 5 cents a piece, and you have to figure out what you're going to use them for. Well, they also had some French Army blankets. So I thought, I wonder if those are wool. So what we did is we bought one. We went to the grocery store, and we bought some stuff for lunch, and I bought a container of Dixie cups and some bleach. My husband's got a pocket knife because man goes nowhere without his pocket knife. And so we cut off a little bit of the blanket and we put it in the bleach. Now, ideally, what I would also do is put a piece of something that I know 100% is wool. And that would usually be something like this, right? So this is a tail of a piece of green that I had just been hooking with. I know this is wool. I know 100% this is wool. So I would put that in with about the same size piece from the blanket. And when they're both gone, then I know that what I'm testing is wool. Now, what'll happen? If it turns out to be a blend, you'll end up with like a loosely woven piece of mesh. You could end up, particularly if it's rayon, you're going to end up with a bunch of short threads. You're going to end up with some kind of a debris that doesn't dissolve in the bleach. Okay? So that's how you test for it. Now, I've heard other people saying, well, you can test it by burning it. Well, first off, I don't want you setting anything on fire. And second off, do you really want to know what human hair smells like when it's burning? I don't. I don't want that in my memory bank. And that's the way you're supposed to test it. When you burn it, is you burn it and then you smell the smoke. And if it smells like human hair burning, then it's wool. It could be 90% wool and it'll pass the flame test. 90% will not pass the bleach test. So that's the way I know for sure. Now, does that mean you can't use it? No. It just means now you know what you're dealing with, right? There have been times when it was like, okay, we need something shiny and black and kind of not really sparkly, but reflective. What would that be? And as I was teaching the workshop, I looked around the room and there was this big, huge garbage can with a big, giant garbage bag on it. And I said, okay, go over there and cut off a piece of that garbage bag because I think that garbage bag would make your witch hat look really cool. So you can hook with anything. The important thing is you just need to know what it is that you're hooking with. And if you've got something that is a blend and it's not 100% wool, it is not recommended that it go through your cutter. So, and that is recommended by the cutter manufacturer. So here on Zoom, Mary has said that Sharpin, SHARPIN Designs on Etsy sews custom cozies. She says Judy Taylor uses hand towels on top of her gripper strips. Yeah, I use rugwort, so I don't have to deal with any of that. I do know some people who will put on like socks, or I've even seen one person use like the leg of jeans, and she had like a ribbon. I don't know how she tied it to, so I don't know how that worked. I didn't get that close to it, but people have experimental ways of keeping this part of their arm safe if they're using linen on gripper strips. So the other question was how to protect your wool from moths. Well, I wrote a book. That one's currently still out of print. It's called Dyeing Without Dye, and my goal is to re-edit it, which won't take that terribly long because it doesn't need a huge makeover, and get it printed again. And that's like everything you can do to your wool without dyes. Okay, dyeing by the numbers is how to dye with dyes that acid set dyes, but dyeing without dye is all about everything you can do, like how to wash it, how to protect it from moss, how to penny dye it, how to onion skin dye it, and it has a lot of different techniques. That book is still out of print, but when I researched the chapter about moths, I called 3 exterminators to a man. I asked him this question: what do I do if I have a collection of wool that I value, and then I find out I have moths? What should I do? To a man, each one of them said, move. There's no amount of lavender sachets, no amount of cedar chests, no amount of anything is going to prevent it if you have an infestation. So what we have to do is prevent it. Okay, so the ways to prevent it: nothing comes in unless it's going straight to the washer. And then it goes straight into the washer, and then it goes through a hot dryer. Then if it's recycled clothing and I'm going to cut it apart, I take it outside, preferably away from my porch. I take it outside, usually out by the campfire, and I rip it apart. The garbage goes in the campfire. The rest of it comes in the house. Now, I don't like to rip it without it being washed first. I think wool rips easier once it's been washed. I think it gets some of the goo out of the clothing. You don't know where this piece of clothing has been. I'm sure they didn't take it to the cleaners before they donated it to the Goodwill. So you want to get it nice and clean. Then long-term storage. Do not store your wool on wooden shelves unless you have those wooden shelves protected. And that would be paint, varnish, some kind of a sealant. Mine are on wire shelving. And this wire shelving, you can get a variation of it. You can't get the same brand I have. Mine were sold from Target, but Amazon has some. You just want the whole opening to be roughly 15 inches, not the 12, because it's hard to get wool. It's too skinny, but yet then it's not big enough. Okay. I can get two layers on one shelf, one 15-inch shelf. And then I have it pulled away from the wall. The shelf is attached to the wall, mainly because this is a public place. And then behind it, I have lighting, LED lighting, which came out perfect timing for me, right? Because there's no heat in the LED. So they are just zip tied to the back of the shelves. And so you have this beautiful backlit space, which I put in, not because I was smart about wool moss. I put it in because my son, who worked at the time on set construction, he worked for CBS in New York, and he said, "Mom, you got to backlight that." I'm like, "Okay, come home, show me what you're talking about." And so we did a little trip to Rural King. We got our shop light, LED shop lights. I don't remember how much they were. They were on sale that week. It didn't cost a whole lot. And literally zip tied them to the back of the shelving unit. Moths do not like light. They do not like air movement. So if you put them in a plastic tub and you seal it and then you shove that in a closet, you've just created the perfect environment for wool moths. So your best bet is, if you absolutely have to keep it in a closet, take everything out, put wire shelving with lights behind it, because now that closet's going to be a little bit dark. Put that lighting in behind it, and then change out your doors so that you have a louver door, so you've got plenty of air circulation. That would be my recommendations. Any other questions about wool moths? That's a pretty big subject before I move off. Okay, Crystal likes that. Good. Okay. Mary has said there was a discussion about changing the terminology texture. And this discussion took place at Sauter Village. What is currently called texture is actually pattern. Texture is tactile. And yeah, I agree with that. But I also agree that that is something that has been used since the 70s, probably. And it's going to take a long time for it to change. So Mary is saying the only way to kill moths and moth larvae is dry ice. As a weaver, our guild frequently receives donations of wool from people's stashes when they die. This is how we kill them. And she gave me a link. Okay, and that link is in the chat for those of you who are on Zoom. And I can put it into the YouTube chat for you guys. Or at least I thought I could. Copy. Paste. Nope, it's not going to work. Email me and I'll get you. If you are a Rug Cooking Journey member, I will put this link into the replay notes. The other thing that you can do, I don't have a lot of room in my freezer, but maybe you do, or you've got an extra chest freezer. You can freeze your wool. I often will do this with like yarn. If I find a good quality yarn at Goodwill, I will buy it, but then it goes in the freezer. And what's important is the freeze-thaw cycle. So I will freeze it for weeks on end. I usually forget it's in there. Oh, yeah, take it out. And then when I'm tired of looking at it, I put it back in. And the freezer is nowhere near my wool stash, different end of the house. So that seems to work, for those kinds of things. But generally, a run through the washer and dryer has kept me safe. Okay, here's another one from Nancy. She says, sometimes my wool strip edges fray when I pull them through. ? Why? I had a student who ran into that, and she was sitting right next to somebody else, and it worked out really good because I could then show her the differences. The differences was she was using some cutter I have never seen before, and it might have been dull, and it was kind of chewing the edges of her wool, and she was using recycled wool. The woman sitting next to her had a beeline cutter, and she was using properly prepared rug cooking wool. There's a big difference. Not all wool is created equal. That's what's unfortunate. You see that wool label and you think you're golden. You're not. If it's worsted, it's the worst. Just remember that. It could be what usually happens why the edges fray is if it's not perfectly on the straight of grain. Because if you've got threads that are coming off to the side, those get loose, and those are big enough that they stick up and they cause havoc on the top of your rug. If it's just the little edges on the outside, generally I would assume that means maybe the wool hasn't been washed enough. Now, back in probably the mid-90s, No, couldn't have been. Had to have been mid, I don't remember when it was. Say around 2010. Who knows? There was this wool that was out there that they called British wool. And I had a regular top loading washer at the time. I would have to wash that wool 4 to 5 times before it was ready for the shelf. Okay. When it goes on the shelf, it is perfect. It is ready to hook with. I got it out of the dryer and it still felt like it was racking. It just wasn't felted up enough. So it would go in the wash again. And then it would go in with the next load. And I would do that. And I started tagging them so that I could get an idea of how long. Every time it went through, I would put a safety pin in it. So if it had one safety pin, it had been washed twice, right? If it had 2 pins, oh, there goes the balloons. If it had 2 pins, I had washed it 3 times. So I came to know that it took 4 to 5 times for it to wash it. So if it's fraying, then I would definitely wash it again. Now, that said, the strips that I see that fray the most are the strips that are included in kits, pre-cut kits. That the wool is often unwashed, it's often junk wool, it's not always the best. So if that's what you're using, Nancy, kind of hold your breath, get your hands on some good rug hooking wool and try that before you give up rug hooking. My wool is, for the most part, I mean, I've gotten several new patterns since I filmed these videos, but there's several videos on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you Google or put in the search Cindy Gay and then put in your color, Cindy Gay green, it's going to show you my green video. Any of those wools, unless I say that it's a little bit loose, are going to hook up really nice for you, and you're not going to have that kind of situation with it. It's not as likely to fray out the eyes. It's possible you could be doing something that would cause the fraying, particularly if when you're underneath and you do a yarn over and you're moving that strip a lot, that could do it. That right now, that's what I can think of off the top of my head. So consider where you got it. Did somebody else cut it? And maybe it shouldn't have been cut. It should have been washed another time, or it should have been washed for its first time. That's going to be your best bet. Let me know if I answered that completely for you, Nancy. Crystal is asking, have I ever hooked with camel wool? No, but I whipped a rug with camel yarn. Most expensive skein of yarn I ever bought. I think it was like $50 for one skein, and this was, I was going for my McGowan certification, so this had to have been easily 20 years ago. And it was wonderful yarn, very soft, very supple. I don't see a problem hooking with camel or cashmere or any of those if you can afford them and if you can get your hands on them. There's still protein fibers. There's still, it's still animal hair, like wool is, and I think you're fine.
Okay, it was, sorry, just going in for the next page, but I bought it at a thrift store and washed and dried the tar out of it, and it's really soft, unlike camel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
took the risk.
I would almost reserve that for like the pillow back, even if you had to dye it, because it's so soft. And once you cut it up and mix it in with other stuff, you're going to lose that super softness. There was something else I was going to tell you and I totally forgot. But Mary has gone on to explain, she says 100% camel is very expensive and very soft. Yes. I haven't read the rest of this. She says for spinners, it is de-haired, hence the incredible softness. Though you might use it for effect in a wall hanging, it's too soft for a rug. It is also a short fiber, so it has to be spun very tightly or it will pill.
Okay.
So again, it
Great, thank you.
might be good. I do have some, I bought it from Door Mill, and it's a horrible mint green color. Not my go-to color. But it's cashmere and wool blend. And I have to this day not cut that up because someday that's going to make like a robe or a bed jacket or something along that line because it is so soft. And I'll probably make the garment. It'll be an oversized garment so it doesn't have to fit perfectly. Then wash it, then dye it. I guess I wouldn't have to wash it. I could just go ahead and dye it. But I think it would be cool if it was sewn up and then I spot dyed it so that, it goes right over the seam. The color does. So that's my plan. Someday I'll do that. What other questions?
What about explaining holidays?
Holidays? Yes. What's a holiday? A holiday is when we get with the rug hookers and we go somewhere fun like Sauter Village. No, a holiday is a break in your work. And it just means you look at the back of your rug and you should see backing. If you don't see any backing, you are a packer and we need to talk. Packing is hard on the backing. It's hard on your rug. It's hard on you because it makes it hard to pull the loops up. It makes your rug hard. It makes everything hard. So you really don't want to get into the realm of packing. There's a way to tell. There's a simple test for you to see if you cook as a packer. Let me get a piece of paper. Okay. And let me put this camera here and get a marker. Okay, so if this is your backing, I guess I gotta go more this way. Okay. If this is your backing, here we go. And these are your loops. And you're plugging along, right? And everything is perfect because they are standing straight up and down. When you start to pack, this is what happens. And the top of the loop and the bottom of the loop now are at an angle. Okay? That is not what you want to do because that is putting too much pressure on your backing. You're wasting wool. You're putting more loops in than you need to. Now, this is going to be hard to tell in your regular hooking. So what you can do is just move your rug so that the side of your rug is on your frame and just hook a straight line. Hook 10, 11, 12 strips and then look at those last few. Are they at an angle like this or are they still standing up perfectly on their own? So that's one form of packing. Another form of packing is when the rows themselves are too close together. And there's no real visual on that other than when you look on the back of the rug, you don't see any backing because you put the next row so close that there's no backing showing. And that would be an indicator that you pack side to side. Most people, when they're packers, they do both. Okay, but there are still some people who might pack just one way or the other. Okay. What else do we have comment-wise? Yeah, Nancy said, she goes, let me do this over here. She goes, thank you, that was helpful, but I think I'm ready to take the step and buy a cutter. You can cut with scissors. You can do that. The problem with no longer buying kits is that you got to put the color plan together. Okay. So I have a solution for that, by the way, and that is called practical color planning for rug hookers. And I talk a tiny bit. If you sign up for a color planning class and all they teach you is secondary colors, tertiary colors, complementary colors, triad colors, analogous colors. If that's all you end up learning, you didn't learn enough. Okay, so I call it practical color planning for rug hookers because I'm going to teach you things like the pinch test. I am going, did I lose Zoom? No, okay. I'm going to teach you things like the pinch test. I'm going to teach you how to use like some of the painting color sample things that you get at the paint department at like Home Depot, that kind of thing. I'm going to teach you how to use value to decide where your colors go. I'm going to teach you what I consider the practical side of color planning. The in the trenches, here's how to go. Now there, I think maybe 1 or 2 lessons that are in there that do talk about color theory, because I think you need to know the language so you can talk to other people. So if someone says, oh, look, that's an analogous color plan, you don't have to be sitting there wondering what analogous means while the discussion has gone on and left you, right? So I teach you enough color theory to know the language, and then we get straight into the practical stuff. And it's my longest course, longest meaning longest running. I started selling that, I think, in 2016. And I've been improving it. It's gone through several iterations of improvement. So it's time tested. It includes a free pattern. It's one course that I'm really, really proud of. It's the most complete. Okay. Where was I going with that? When you're a beginner, you got to choose your own colors. So what you can do is sort of an interim step. And any rug hooking teacher, based on their schedule, will do this for you. Some teachers will only do it if you are in a workshop class. I will do it because I'm not teaching workshop classes. I do all my teaching here online. So if you're here, if you're in Japan, if you're in England, as long as the time schedule meshes up, you can participate in the rug hooking journey, or simply watch the replays. Then you can be anywhere you want, and you can watch them at a time that's convenient for you. There was something else. There was a point. This was leading up to a point, and I forgot what it is. Okay, an hour and a half. It must be my limit. So Mary has also put in there, she says, Surrey alpaca is very strong like silk. It is also very dense, which makes it heavy, so it will not stand up like wool. Wool is the best fiber. It resists, the biggest thing that I get from what I call lay people, meaning people who are not in the rug hooking community, one of the things that the public will ask is, well, how do you clean them? Well, how do you clean your regular rugs? You run a vacuum over them. I vacuum my rugs. My room size rug still isn't ready for the floor, mainly because my dog isn't ready for my room size rug to be ready for the floor. But when that situation and that training is complete, the way I will clean it will be with a vacuum cleaner. And yes, I vacuum my hand hooked rugs. I am very careful on the edges. So I usually will vacuum from the center out and then just keep going. I don't stop at the edge. I just keep going. Then I pick up the vacuum and go again. As long as that's not the situation, then you're good to go. So Nancy has said, she goes, yes, I'm not confident in choosing colors yet. What you can do is talk to that teacher and ask for a full color plan. Now, for me, what that involves is we have a Zoom discussion. We talk about what kind of colors you like, what kind of colors you don't. You might send me a piece of fabric for inspiration. That's included in the color planning course. So I will use that as a stepping stone. I want this rug to have the same feeling as this fabric. Not necessarily a perfect match color by color, but I want the overall feel to be the same as that feel of that fabric. And I'll put together that color plan along with, here, flower A, use this color and this color, and I'll tell you where it goes, if that's what you want. Otherwise, I'll just send you a bunch of wool that you can put wherever you want.
Cindy, do you, hi, Lily. I just came on. I just saw your email.
Yeah.
Do you, sell hooks?
I don't sell hooks. I mean, I have a few here for sale. So I might have something that you can use, but for the most part, no, I don't keep a big inventory of hooks. Mainly because
I need a hook.
Okay.
I need a hook for like a 3 cut.
Well, I use one hook to hook everything.
Oh, okay.
So I don't change hooks. So it's just a matter of, what works and what doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. What other questions do we have?
Do you have a beginner course?
That's what this was.
Oh, I know. I just got on. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we've been on for about 90 minutes. So yeah.
I know. I just saw it in my email.
Yeah, and then inside the rug hooking journey is a course called The Basics. And in that course is where I've collected a lot of what I consider basics, beginner stuff.
Okay.
I am always surprised that when I teach a beginner class, I'll have even experienced rug hookers say, I forgot all about that, or I never knew that, or I was told to do that, but I didn't know why. So that's my mission, is to explain the why and to tell you basically what you need and not a whole lot extra. And that's what the basics course will give you. It'll
Right.
help. It'll show you, what to do next.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okie dokie. Okay, so we've got all the questions, all the comments there. And I got all the comments done there. I am, because it's 3:33, it's so close to 4 o'clock. This is normally when I would get on to do the hook in. I think I'm just going to relax. You guys can relax, and we'll just slide right into the hook in. But if while you're sitting there, you think of something that you want to ask a question about, feel free to just unmute. And I am going to let YouTube go, and we're going to go straight into the weekly hook-in. So thank you for those of you who have been here on YouTube. I hope you'll consider loading Zoom onto your device. It works on any device, and there's an app for that. And then you load it onto your device, and then you never, ever, ever, ever open it. All you need to do is look for a link in an email or on the dashboard in the rug hooking journey. Click that link and you can join us on Zoom. I go live. Well, it depends on how you count it, I guess. I go live twice a week. I go live on Tuesdays and on Saturdays. But we also have a Wednesday hook-in that my friend Kim Hurt is in charge of running. but I'm there often on those Wednesdays. So the Saturday and Wednesday hook-ins are free. You do not have to join anything. But if you really want the best education in rug hooking that I have available, it's inside the Rug Hooking Journey. It has replays from office hours that go back to 2016. I've been doing this for a long time, online and even longer in person. So I know all the practical ways that work for most rug hookers. So I hope you'll join us over there. I am going to detach YouTube at this point, and if I can remember how, yes, I think I do. And then we will continue on Zoom for the hook-in. So if you're watching on YouTube and you want to join us on Zoom for the hook-in, you can do that. Just head on over to Cindy Gay Rug Hooking. Jeez, I can't talk anymore. And click on the Saturday hook-in link. So I hope to see you there. Bye, everybody. Okay, if you're here on Zoom, don't go. Let me end